In the earlier part of this program, we had tried to show the relation between science and yoga, and also shown a few case studies to prove that yoga plays an important role in the cure of diseases. In this part of program, we shall be dealing with a few other diseases and the role of yoga in them. A study was done on a group of rheumatoid patients in Great Britain at the South Cleveland Hospital. Autoimmunity is considered to be the cause of rheumatoid.
The mind, stress, works on your immune system and brings about lot of depression or inefficiency of the immune system, works on the joints and produces fighting. Unnecessary fighting against our own body tissues, which really should not have happened. After all, our immune cells has to fight only against the enemies from outside. But because they have no better business and they are all restless, agitated and tense, they go and attack our own body cells, thinking that they are foreign. What a dangerous situation.
The results were quite encouraging, as the group who performed yoga saw a considerable reduction in the quantity of drugs to be consumed daily, and also the capacity to hold the grip had also improved quite considerably.
Doctor, you have talked previously about the role of yoga in pulmonary tuberculosis. So can you emphasize about some...
This was a very interesting study that we took up. We went to sanatoria where patients are isolated because they are producing lot of TB germs even in their sputum, and they will become infect to the society around. Therefore, they are kept away until their sputum negativity is achieved. So such people, 48 of them we studied, and in the age group of 20 to 55, and they were all having the same type of sputum positivity. They had had no prior treatment and they were all coming for the first time for treatment, and we added yoga to these people for 2 months. They were practicing for 1 hour, and we made various types of assessments, and we proposed 2 possibilities. The possibility 1 is where they are producing lot of infective germs and they become totally nil after 2 months, and another possibility where there is no change. And we noticed that the group who had practiced yoga had improved much faster. The possibility 1, that from high infectivity to nil infectivity, was 76% in the yoga group as compared to the non-yoga group, where it was only about 50%, showing that their sputum negativity or the germs can be fought away much faster if we can strengthen their immune system. Their body weight increased much more rapidly in the yoga group as compared to the control group. The possibility that the grade 3 to grade 0 of the radiographic changes, the X-ray changes, had been achieved much faster in the yoga group as compared to the non-yoga group. So that is what we say, that when a person practices yoga, even when he has pulmonary tuberculosis, their lung capacity improves, they reduce their infectivity much faster. And how could this be achieved? This is what we say is the concept of psychoneuroimmunology, where the mind can influence our immune system to fight away the germs much faster by reduction of the stress, by becoming very deeply rested inside. And that is what is the concept of yoga in even as infective a disease as tuberculosis.
Another study was conducted at the Kidwai Research Memorial Institute, Bangalore, where it was to be found out as to what effect does yoga has on these 40 patients of uterine cervix. It is said that even a healthy body manufactures a few cancer cells, and if the body is normal, then the immune system is strong enough to pick up these cancer-prone cells and then destroying them. Going back to the research study, the daily feedback reports were collected from these patients to find out the common side effects of radiotherapy. This group was doing yoga for 30 to 45 minutes daily. It was seen that the symptoms of acute bowel complaints had considerably reduced in the yoga group.
I am reminded of a lady who went through this intensive radiotherapy for which she had to be isolated inside a room. She had kept cassette records of all the various yogic techniques. She would just put on the cassette, lie down and keep on doing it all day. It is a total isolation. It's almost like isolation in a cell. And she came out and said, I had a beautiful retreat inside these 3 days rather than going through this intense, terrifying experience of being isolated, going through all the side effects of the radiation. So that's how a positive quality of life has been shown to be achieved in large number of people with cancer.
Now we shall be showing you a few of the methods of doing yoga as well as the logic behind these yogas.
In fact, we have been able to use many special techniques in various diseases. Let us see this technique called chair breathing, which we use in the management of acute attacks of asthma. Here, the subject is seated with the support of a chair. In fact, this we developed when the person was having an acute attack during our classes, and the nearby chair was pulled out because it is only in that position that the person is more comfortable when he is having intense wheezing, and he hangs on to the handle of the chair and starts breathing comfortably, slowly as he can. We know that he is having intense fast breathing, and the person is continuously given instructions of breathing in slowly as the head goes up, breathe out as the head goes down, and this goes on continuously and at the speed that he can. In the management of back pain, it's very important to see that we avoid any forward bending. So the person lies down on his back and starts doing what we call as folded leg lumbar stretch. Both the legs are folded up and stretched laterally so that the person can feel the stretch in the painful area of the back, and this being very harmless for the back. The person can do this about 10 times combined with normal natural breathing movements. The back is moved and person is asked to concentrate intensely on the point of the back. After doing about 10 times, the person goes on to practice another back pain special technique called Setu Bandhasana lumbar stretch, where the legs are folded and the waist is lifted up as the person breathes in, and the waist comes down as the person breathes out. Apart from all the practices that we did, Dhanurasana, the bow posture, is one of the very useful practices in the management of diabetes. Hansasana, in which the person lies down on the abdomen and takes all the weight of the body on the elbows, which is stuck into the abdominal wall, and the legs are stretched back. So in this position there is intense pressure on the abdominal organs, and it is said in the yogic text that this may help in releasing the insulin from the pancreatic cells, and certainly it does increase the blood flow to the pancreas. Whether there is more insulin that is formed or released has yet to be observed scientifically. Let me now show you some of the practices that we use in the management of rheumatoid arthritis, which involves all the joints, lot of painful joints, and so to release the stiffness in the joints, the person starts doing slow but persistent, continuous, stable movements of the different joints. We may start with fingers and then go on to wrist movements. So in the wrist movements we can do the forward, backward and rotation of the wrists also, about 10 times each one of these movements. Then one goes on to move the shoulders, shoulder rotation. Every joint is given the possible movements. Whatever the person can do, the person goes on doing to the possible range also. We don't have to overforce or work intensively, but gradually the stiffness gets released when one does it with an attitude of ease, comfort, and starts putting the mind with eyes closed on the point that is painful, on the joint that is getting released, and then at the end of it drops down the hand and relaxes the part completely. Let me show you some very simple practices that we use in people who have high blood pressure or even have had heart attacks. Heart attack people have enormous fear that any physical movement may strain them, and therefore they have also been advised not to do it, and we also do not want to overstrain their hearts. So we teach them many practices like Shavasana and Pranayama. Shavasana is a very useful technique in which the person lies down, and one of the very useful technique that we use is called quick relaxation technique, where the person lies down flat on the bed and starts observing the movement of the abdomen. As the person breathes in, the abdomen comes up. As the person breathes out, the abdomen goes down. And this abdominal movement is deepened, and the person starts doing very deep abdominal breathing in a very, very comfortable mood. And this gives enormous relaxation. And this can be done within just 2-3 minutes several times in the day by people who have hypertension, because it is the bad habit of our arteries to get into spasm and the BP tends to go up. So the persons with hypertension and heart problem are advised to practice this several times in the day whenever they get free time, before food, after food, any time they can practice this. You notice that in all this there is this basic component of relaxation, calmness of mind, stabilization, ease, rest, etc., both to the local parts and to the entire system.
Madam, the patient of any age group can practice these asanas?
Yes. In fact, we have been able to teach yoga to people of all ages. In fact, we say from womb to tomb, yoga can be of great help. We have had some research where the mothers, when they practiced yoga, the baby in the womb also gets a lot of benefit as observed through blood flow changes to the baby and all that. But generally it is understood that a child at the age of 10 years starts doing the practices if they are normal healthy children, but we will be able to use many simple practices even in younger children.
Welcome friends to a new session in the paper Organization of Knowledge, Library Classification. In this session we will discuss various definitions of knowledge, the nature of the universe of knowledge and its different characteristics. Knowledge is the creation of human beings. Universe of knowledge is the totality of knowledge that has being generated now and will be generated in future. The universe of knowledge is ever changing. It is developing at an increasingly faster rate. The nature of interrelations among the entities may change, and new kinds of relationship may be recognized from time to time by subject specialists. The activities of humans that started in prehistoric era continue till human exists on earth. Thus, the addition to universe of knowledge will also continue. Different classification schemes were given a well-developed scheme in order to incorporate the minute subdivisions of each major subjects now, and even if they expand due to continuous explosion of the world of knowledge. Universe of knowledge. The name universe of knowledge is given to the study of knowledge from various viewpoints. Ranganathan initiated this study. It consists of three important elements: historical, philosophical and sociological. The term knowledge is used here in its widest possible sense. It includes both disciplines which make statements about the world and those that create knowledge. It is the province of philosophers, scientists and historians. Librarians are not experts on the universe of knowledge. They are interested about the findings of the knowledge creators. They must base their work on those findings. Librarians need to define the areas of knowledge for bibliographic classification. Definition of knowledge. Knowledge can be defined as the facts, feelings or experiences known by persons of both people. The state of knowing. Awareness, consciousness or familiarity gained by experience or learning. Erudition or informed learning. Specific information about a subject. Knowledge is the familiarity with someone or something, which can include facts, information, descriptions or skills acquired through experience or education. It can refer to the theoretical or practical understanding of subject. It can be implicit or explicit. It can be more or less formal or systematic. In philosophy, the study of knowledge is called epistemology. The philosopher Plato defined knowledge as justified true belief. However, no single agreed upon definition of knowledge exists. Knowledge acquisition involves complex cognitive process, perception, communication, association and reasoning, while knowledge is also said to be related to the capacity of acknowledgement in human beings. Characteristics of universe of knowledge. Some of the qualities of universe of knowledge are: A. Multi-dimensions. It is multidimensional. It means that many parameters are needed to describe the position of any existent in that universe. As the universal knowledge is developed by research, the number of parameters steadily increases. The expansion is invariably linked with time. If the time component becomes 0, expansion automatically stops. Similarly, if the space of the universe of knowledge becomes finite, expansion stops. Hence, time and space both will have to be finite for the internal expansion of knowledge. B. Infinite. The universe of knowledge is infinite. The number of items of knowledge, that is existence, in that universe is unlimited. The mass or the extension of an item of knowledge may be very small at one extreme and very at large at the other. C. Dynamic. The infinite universe is ever growing. There are new developments in it from time to time. It throws forth new items of knowledge. These new items could not be anticipated almost till they actually appeared. We do not know what comes round the corner at any moment. It may be a massive item of knowledge comparable to what we know, or it could be tinier than any item known to us. Indeed, the universe of knowledge is dynamic, with capacity to throw forth forever new items of knowledge and calling for their own respective positions among the ones already existing. D. It is composed of scattered segments separated by space. E. It is not continuous like time. F. Expansion without action is incomprehensible. Therefore, action is an integral component of the universe of knowledge. G. The universe of knowledge is super flexible. However, much one segment expands, there will be always space for further expansion. H. The speed and theoretical and practical form of expansion in all directions is not the same. I. In the course of expansion, some segments get overloaded, attain critical mass, and finally burst into smaller segments, establishing their own identities and remain bound with the parent segment. J. In certain cases, with the passage of time, parts of two or more segments merge together to form a new segment. Example, biochemistry, while the parent segment do not lose the parts. K. At times, several segments are found together in the form of a cluster where all segments retain their own identities. Example, oceanography, physical science, etc. L. The universe of knowledge is a continuum, that is, it has no holes. Whatever be the holes currently present in the universe of knowledge, it is believed that with the development of the universe of knowledge through research, the holes will be successfully filled up. It is our faith that any spot in a universe of knowledge lying bare will be cultivated at a later time. Cultural aspects of knowledge. If a particular religion is dominant in a particular culture, then it is accorded pride of place in the organization of recorded knowledge. In a Eurocentric culture, the dominance of Christianity can be explained historically, but this dominance in a classification scheme is difficult to justify to multicultural and multi-faith users. This problem has an acute practical side as publishing expands in the area of comparative and non-Christian religions. Universe of knowledge according to Hindu philosophy. According to Hindu philosophy, the universe is composed of 5 primary elements: Shidi, earth; up, water; Tejas, energy; Marut, air; and Vyoman, space. In the universe of knowledge, we find all the elements. Some segments of the universe are like Shidi, having identifiable shape and measurable size. The segments of second category are like Aap, still not having any solid foundation and well-defined shape, but likely to have a definite shape and size in future. The rest of the segments are nebulous like Marut, not having any fixed shape or size. They may or may not attain the up and subsequently Shidi stage. Some may vanish forever from the Marut stage itself. In the universe of knowledge, time is but an indispensable component. The concept of time is missing in the above 5 primary elements. We can find in the Hindu philosophy Srishti, creation; Sthiti, stability; and Laya, destruction. If the time component is 0, then there won't be any Sthiti. Hence, it can be easily assumed that the time component is embedded in these 3 components. Of the 8 concepts of Hindu philosophy, Ranganathan has taken only 5 in his PMEST. The presence of energy, space, and time is quite clear. Possibly, personality and matter take care of the primary elements Shidi, up, and Marut. Ranganathan describes the Vedic system of knowledge as 1. Dharma, concerned with the preservation of society as a coherent organization. It is the minimum and primary knowledge for being a member of the community. It dealt with law, religion, philosophy, and ethics. 2. Artha, the knowledge required by a state at material, economic and political levels. It covered economics and applied sciences. 3. Karma, knowledge pursued for its own sake or joy in artistic creation. It covered linguistics, literature and fine arts. 4. Moksha, the knowledge that only a small minority in any community find competence or leisure to develop or appreciate. It meant spiritualism and mysticism. Characteristics of segments. The segments of the universe of knowledge have some characteristics as follows. 1. The segment is born simultaneously with the birth of the subject. 2. A segment does not possess a constant shape or size. They may undergo change with the passage of time. 3. There are 4 categories of segments such as objects, action, space and time. Object segment includes all nouns except space and time. Example, mathematics. The content of a segment will be a subject. All these objects can have qualifiers. Example, theoretical physics, poet Rabindranath. Action segments include verbs. Example, diagnosis, treatment, classification, cataloging. The content of the segment can also become a subject. All actions can also have qualifiers. Example, X-ray diagnosis, heat treatment, broad classification, digital cataloging. Space segment includes geographical as well as astronomical space. Example, India, Delhi, sky, space, etc. The content of the segment can become a subject. Like object and action, space can also have qualifiers. Example, North India, blue sky, dark space, etc. Time segment includes time in all its manifestations. Example, 20th century, calendar year, rainy season, etc. This segment can also have qualifiers. Example, 20th century, calendar year, rainy season. 4. A segment contains a subject which has its own entity, location and comfortably separated by space from one another. 5. All segments are bound by invisible bounds. It is not possible to predict at what time and location bounds between two or more segments will become stronger, and they will share some areas to give rise to a new segment. As far as consistency is concerned, there are 3 categories of segments. The segments of the first category are well formed, having more or less identifiable size and shape, well recognized by the academic bodies and taught in academic institutions. Example, physics. The second segments are yet to take the definite shape and are at different stages of development. The third category is nebulous. Example, palmistry, astrology. 7. A segment is capable of splitting into numerous subdivisions and each subdivision into further subdivisions and so on, whose number cannot be predicted in advance. 8. Each segment is capable of sharing a portion of its content without losing the same. It is analogous to human beings sharing of knowledge. 9. Each segment passes through the stages of creation, srishti, stability, sthiti and decay or destruction, laya. 10. A segment can appear at any part of the universe of knowledge as cloud forms in the sky the moment the situation becomes ripe for the same. The birth of a segment indicates the birth of a subject. Types of segments. Singular segment. There are different types of singular segment: unifocal, bifocal and multifocal. A unifocal segment is devoted to a single subject like physics. A bifocal segment deals with parts of 2 subjects. Example, bioengineering. A multifocal segment is formed by drawing materials from several subjects. Example, medical biochemistry. Binary segments. In this segment, 2 independent subjects are closely linked. Example, science and technology, language and literature, electricity and magnetism. Books may appear on binary segments depicting various aspects including general descriptions, similarities, differences, comparisons, influence, bias, etc. Cluster segments. In the universe, star clusters are common. The same is the case with the universe of knowledge. Here, several subjects are found together, all maintaining their own identities. Example, physical sciences, biosciences. Cyclopedia segment. This type of segments draws materials from all or many segments to form a single segment. We can find this in general encyclopedias, general periodicals and books on general knowledge. Affinitive segment. An affinitive segment has tendency to attach itself to another segment without becoming a part of the attaching segment. Example, management can be attached itself to segments like medicines and agriculture, giving rise to medical management, agricultural management. Comprehensive segment. This segment covers all the aspects of a subject. Example, the dictionary of petroleum. This dictionary includes the economy for petroleum, chemistry of petroleum, geology of petroleum, mining and petroleum, refining of petroleum, storage of petroleum, transportation of petroleum and so on. Form-based segment. The matter pertaining to a subject can be expressed or presented in various forms such as dictionary, take a textbook and a monograph. Invention-based segment. The moment an invention takes place, generally a patent is produced that gives rise to a segment in the universe of knowledge. Example, spectroscope. The use of the invention at times gives rise to another segment. Example, spectroscopy. These two are different subjects. The concept of subject in universe of knowledge. The concept of subject has been defined by many based on their own viewpoint. Some of the definitions of subject are: A matter or topic that forms the basis of a conversion, train of thought, investigation, etc. B, a branch of knowledge as a course of study. C, a branch of learning. D, the branch of knowledge studied or taught in a school, college or university. E, an organized body of ideas whose extension and intentions are likely to fall coherently within the field of interest and comfortably within the intellectual competence and the field of inevitable specialization of a normal person. F, a subject is an organized and systematized body of ideas. It may consist of one idea or a combination of several. Classification systems. A complete map of any area of knowledge displaying all its concepts and their relationships is known as a classification scheme or system. Such classification schemes for knowledge may be designed for different purposes. E.C. Richardson gave a useful classification of these purposes. He divided systems first into theoretical and practical. He arranged theoretical system into three classes. A, the philosophical or scientific classes concerned with the order of sciences or the order of things. B, the pedagogic, which are organized with reference to course of education. C, the encyclopedic, which is akin to pedagogic but included some material as well as outline. Richardson divided practical systems into the bibliothetic and the bibliographic. The bibliothetic is meant for arranging books on the shelves of a library. The bibliographic is suitable for arrangement of titles in a bibliography. Let us summarize the ideas that we have discussed during this session. In this unit, it is tried to explain the various definitions of knowledge and the nature of the universe of knowledge and the different characteristics of the universe of knowledge. The universe of knowledge is ever changing. It is developing at an increasingly faster rate due to research in various fields of the existing knowledge and also in the multidisciplinary fields. The nature of interrelations among the entities may change and new kinds of relationships may be recognized from time to time by subject specialists. Thus, the addition to universe of knowledge will also continue till human exists on earth. It is also tried to briefly describe the segments of universe of knowledge as described by Hindu philosophy. From this session, here I can give you a few assignments to work out. 1. Enumerate how universe of knowledge is classified in the universal decimal classification scheme. 2. Enumerate universe of knowledge according to Dewey Decimal Classification Scheme (DDC). 3. How universe of knowledge is classified according to column classification scheme. 4. Explain the different segments of the universe of knowledge with example. 5. Briefly explain the concept of subject according to the universe of knowledge. Now I can suggest a few references also for your further reading. 1. Sen BK 2009 Universe of Knowledge from a New Angle, Annals of Library and Information Studies 56 7 12. 2. Neelamegan A 1967 Research on the Structure and Development of the Universe of Subjects, Library Science with a Slant to Documentation 4. 3. The Concise Oxford Dictionary 1999 10th edition by Judy Pearsall, Oxford OUP. 4. Ranganathan SR 1967 Prolegomena to Library Classification 3rd edition Bombay, Asia Publishing House. 5. Kumar Krishan 1996 Theory of Classification 4th revised edition, New Delhi, Vigas Publishing House Private Limited. Thank you for watching this program. Let us meet again in another episode with another topic. Till then, bye.
Welcome to Interface. We are back for the second part of our conversation with Professor Ramakrishnan, who will be talking about plurality, cultural interface and translation in India. So, as a person who has worked among many languages, how have you found the very process of translation working? Is there some very clear space for translation, and also whether the departments in various states are doing something serious to promote this kind of exchange, at least regionally, for example, translations among Dravidian languages. So is it on, or are there problems?
We are yet to really look at translation as a very important component of living together in a multicultural or what you call multilingual society. I often quote the example of a Turkish university where I went in Istanbul, where there is a department of translation with 60 plus faculty members. And they train people in translation from actual translation of hotel menu to live telecast of Turkish news on BBC. And in our country, translation is put to all kinds of uses in visual media, print media, in publishing, in dubbing, in what you call a variety of, but there is hardly any intellectual input by departments of languages. this failure apart, I do feel English departments have an additional responsibility of bringing together Indian languages or Indian language through the medium of English. A large number of Indian texts are not available for circulation because there are no good translation. And this also makes us strangers in our own country. There is very little communication between Gujarati and Marathi, Hindi and Urdu, Malayalam and Tamil, or Bengali and Oriya. We have reached a stage where people talk only within the language, or people talk in English about the Western literature. We need to actually create a certain discourse about multiple streams of Indian literature, and this can be done by translation. This can also be done by certain kind of literary curriculum where you prescribe texts from multiple literatures. And what I have personally attempted is to look at very strong text which actually need to go beyond their boundary, linguistic boundary. When you find a poet like Muktibodh in Hindi, or when you find a poet like Kolatkar or Dilip Chitra in Marathi, you are instantly struck by the force of their utterance. And this has a significance beyond their own linguistic context. And I have written about Marathi and Hindi literature in Malayalam. And in English again, my attempt has been to draw attention of a large readership to the multiple resources available in Indian literatures to understand our society. This doesn't mean that our literature is merely ethnographic raw material, but our literatures make us available a very rich resource, a kind of resource which also allows us to look at the experiential fabric of the everyday living in India.
In this instance, do you think the European Union offers a good model? Because they have, I understand, facilities for instant translation into 27 languages. All the the languages spoken by in all the member countries of the Union. And they have facilities for all kinds of, as you said, in Turkish. Just as in Turkish, you have translations of literary pieces, scientific and technical literature. So, do you think it is possible in India, such a kind of institutional setup?
Even in Europe, what my own limited understanding tells me, there are what you call major and minor languages. For example, East European languages are a kind of class apart, but they are much more alert to political issues. A language like French has inbuilt resistance to receiving a whole set of what you call third world ideas. And what has happened over a period of time in Europe at least is a certain kind of withdrawal into their own separate, I wouldn't say ghetto, but their own separate provinces.
Multilingual, yes, but only Europe.
Only Europe. And this is one of the major problems of comparative literature theory. When we discuss French school, which has always been a model, it has also increasingly become influence studies within the European context. And when you talk of American comparative literature model, you increasingly find they are concerned with certain parts of Europe and America. they call world literature, entire anthologies are written, you hardly find one person representing the entire Asia. And this is why I have been strongly arguing we need an Indian model of comparative literature. We need to actually look within and also look without.
And probably this Indian model too will have to be fine-tuned a little. For example, these days you have literary gatherings in which intellectuals not only from the Indian states but also from neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Afghanistan, the entire South Asian region participate, and probably a kind of South Asian identity is in the make. So where, for instance, for translation competitions, you have 26 or more languages included. For example, Dari or Pashto or Sinhala. So probably we have to address that also.
In fact, South Asia is also a category created not within Asia. Largely there is an imprint of certain ideologies from the West. But still, it is a framework which can be productive, which can be, because we have shared memories, we have a certain trajectories which actually bind us through common languages, historical roots. But at the same time, what happens to the Indian model is that increasingly there is a certain kind of unequal kind of you see weightage given to certain linguistic traditions within India. For example, if you are studying novel, you would find the Kashmiri novel as a form emerges only in the 50s. There are languages where oral literatures are very, very strong even today. For example, Adivasi languages. Even the word tribal is a very loaded word. So how do we look at Northeast? How do we look at entire categories within India? But these are problems which literature will have to solve through a multidisciplinary kind of effort. We need anthropology, sociology, or ethnography, or even political science people, in order to understand the very complex configuration of history that informs or social kind of structures that inform Indian literature. And of late, if you look at literary studies have also been trying to be interdisciplinary, but this interdisciplinarity does not actually do justice to the experiential content of literature. And there is an increasing feeling that literature is used by historians or political scientists as a certain kind of documentary ethnographic material. But there is a certain experiential matrix from which literature makes its presence felt. David Schulman makes a very interesting comment that you cannot actually translate texture of a poem. Texture is something unique to the language, to the utterance. So there is a certain kind of interiority to a literary tradition. Tagore can be understood only if you enter the intimate spaces within Bengali, or if you enter a certain interior space of Malayalam, you can understand Vailopilli or Eluthachan. And this level of immersion, this level of deep involvement will take a lifetime of very intimate, devoted study.
And not probably the work of one individual.
And not probably one individual. And historians or literature, or political scientists try to actually look at a translation and jump to conclusion, or cursory reading makes them conclude that this text is about this. But perhaps the greatest advantage of comparative literature is it trains you to close reading, and close reading is a cultural responsibility. And when close reading allows you to discover a deeper layer of interior kind of domain of a culture or a language, it also allows you to understand how identities are constituted through discourses. And you can only compare, or you can only use literature for comparison when you have actually looked at the deep internal structure of literary kind of text.
So all this would mean that any kind of homogenization, any attempt to lump together literatures are bound to fail.
Exactly, yeah. In fact, this is one major problem with translations into English. When we translate literatures produced in Indian languages into English, English has a certain kind of power. It's an international language with its own cultural baggage. It produces translations which are eloquent. It produces translations which need to be fluent. So eloquence, fluency, as Lawrence Venuti says, can also sort of create a certain kind of shallowness, or it can actually make these deeper structures disappear, and it may also make you available an abridged version without reference to the complexity. And I am aware of your own work in translation, which has brought out the complexity of sometimes naming, or sometimes how a creative writer like Bashir uses words which have several echoes in Malayalam, and all those echoes are lost when we actually translate them into English. So definitely, as you also have suggested, we need commentaries, we need translation studies as a discipline, which will bring out what is lost in translation through elaborate critical kind of commentaries. Earlier we had this kind of tradition. We had philological commentaries in Sanskrit or in many Indian languages, and commentators used to spend a lifetime explicating a single text, and that could actually allow them to sort of create a system, or create a cognitive kind of philosophy. But now we increasingly import philosophical systems from the West without reference to their own inception, without reference to how these philosophical discourses were constituted in the first instance. So I do feel, if we try to translate the original Derrida, if we try to translate discursive prose from the West, it may actually allow us to grasp the complexity of the Western discourse of what we call textual and the other kind of explication.
It requires painstaking work.
It requires
like the work you just mentioned,
exactly,
of ancient commentators and critics.
Yeah. And I do feel there is a felt need for listening to philosophy from the West. I am not one who would say we need to shut our doors or close our and India is sufficiently rich in that. Actually, if you look at the history of our own thought, Indian thought, it has always been vibrant when it actually got into certain dialogue with other literatures or other ideas, for example, when Persian Arabic kind of aesthetics got into a dialogue with Bhakti, Bhakti actually had a different kind of transformation. When Bhakti reached North India, it actually it encountered Sufism, and you find it also underwent a transmutation. And similar kind of in progressive phase, you find London, Paris, and then Lucknow. The ideology of progressive literature had its origin in certain kind of anti-fascist thought systems in Europe in between the world wars. So if you look at Angare, you see the first major volume of progressive phase, it was conceived in Paris, and then you have Jival Sahityam in Malayalam, following what Premchand said in Lucknow. So there have always been certain kind of crossing boundary. Indian literatures always, whether it is Bhakti or modernism or progressive phase, have always allowed its authors and its ideas to travel. So in that sense, it actually is open to multiple influences, and perhaps we make a major mistake when we actually conceive literature as something bounded by the political kind of frontiers. The political boundary is not the boundary of the culture. Cultures always have porous, what they call permeable kind of boundaries, and Tamil Malayalam both have actually, each has benefited from its association with the other, and you need to actually look at these osmotic pressures which make text open, and a text is always a field of what Bars would say, a field of science. It can we try to actually limit it with one canon or with one, but there are echoes of multiple layers, multiple kind of philosophical system, and it need not be contained in a single kind of framework.
So what is called for is this kind of a new approach, not new, a revival of the kind of approach which once existed.
Exactly.
So what is called for is painstaking work.
Yeah.
The kind of work which would unearth all these deep layers of meaning, signification.
Yeah. In fact, translation sometimes can become a shortcut in the place of this painstaking work. We actually, there is this debate now going on whether comparative literature should actually work with many languages or can work with translations. And I've been actually suggesting that in the Indian context, students need to actually have direct knowledge of at least 2 or 3 languages. It's easy for many students to become familiar with an additional language apart from English and their mother tongue. So this would also allow them to look at the textual traditions in a larger kind of social context.
And there are large multilingual areas in India also.
Yeah.
Multilingual, at least bilingual.
In fact, as I was saying, no linguistic area is homogeneous. You find in the recent People Survey of Indian Languages, Professor Ganesh Devi has been organizing it, and their findings actually reveal that almost all regions are multilingual. Even if you go north or south, or almost every state has 4 or 5 languages. And when you go to northeast, the situation may be much more complex. And what's happening perhaps is, I meet a lot of students from the northeast, and there are situations when a student says he knows only English, or he knows only a rudimentary kind of understanding of his own language. And this is happening even in contexts like Gujarat or Kerala, where students actually come from a certain background, where they feel an Indian language is not something which really carry much in terms of profession or in terms of future much the validity. I think we need to actually change our priorities. At least humanities cannot actually flourish in this country without really nourishing the multiple language traditions in India. And our knowledges will not, I keep emphasizing this point, we need knowledge production in Indian languages. So there should be philosophy, there should be political science, economics in languages like Malayalam and Punjabi, or Gujarati and Bengali. So original text need to be written in these languages, not translation. And this would actually allow a certain scholarship to emerge. And robust scholarship alone can save Indian languages. And this would enable interdisciplinarity much, maybe deeply, much more deeply. So what is happening today is interdisciplinarity doesn't really go deep. In the name of interdisciplinarity, we actually do the same old thing, and we refuse to really cross boundaries.
So what you say is required is a kind of parallel body, a body parallel to the existing bodies like National Translation Mission. So the NTM encourages translation of knowledge. So you would say that there should be a parallel body which encourages the production of knowledge texts.
Exactly.
Parallel to what the NTM is doing.
NTM did try to encourage translation of discursive prose, but it has, I do not know how far it has succeeded.
As far as I understand, they are now doing translation on a large scale from various discourses. But you have suggested that there should be something done to encourage original production.
Original production. Apart from translation, there should also be original production. And this would also help knowledge production. And comparative literature can only flourish if Indian languages find a certain kind of space within the national the knowledge mapping. So today, for all practical purposes, English has become the intellectual language of India. None of the Indian languages, nobody would study Bengali or Malayalam to understand economics or to understand psychology. And why are there no original books on none of these modern disciplines? Even on topics like history of religion, our language, there is so much discussion on religion, but look for a good book on Hinduism in any of the Indian languages, you will not find it. You need an American to write the book, and you also need a certain rigorous scholarship to come from the West. And that's where I feel interdisciplinarity actually should have been cultivated in Indian universities on a much larger scale, and it would have allowed comparative literature to flourish along with translation studies.
So what you mean to say is that all these things go together: plurality,
Exactly.
interdisciplinarity, comparative approaches to literature.
Yeah.
So all these things go together.
In fact, comparative literature cannot become an option for humanities unless other disciplines also flourish. It actually needs to be nourished by multiple disciplines in its vicinity. So we need robust discourses of many branches of knowledge. And when Indian languages themselves do not actually have the robustness, the intellectual rigor which will support critical kind of exploration, comparative literature inherently becomes weak in its disciplinarity. And this is not what is happening in some of the East European languages, some of the Latin American languages. There are very, very important literary histories emerging. There are very important texts about theories emerging. In somebody like Zizek writes in his own language, and there is a great novelist from Turkish and Japanese who have become world novelists. So in that sense, those languages can support a certain creativity which can actually, flourish at the global level. But apart from Indian writing in English, you do not find none of our languages producing writers who actually now make a mark at the global level.
Thank you. So for the very informative discussion.
Hope it has actually helped you and those who will
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to a new session on structural databases. In this session, we will study about the various kinds of structural databases, their organization and their attributes as well. We would also gain an insight about how to use information retrieval system to obtain data and the need to analyze structural data. A database. A database is a repository or collection of information that are organized in such a way that it can easily be accessed, managed and updated. In other words, database may be defined as a collection of related tables that themselves contain lists of records. To ensure that each record is unique, each of the records is given a primary key, usually in the form of an identification number. There are basically two different kinds of databases. They are primary database and secondary database. A primary database consists of data derived experimentally, such as sequences and structures of biological molecules. On the other hand, secondary database contains data derived from analysis and annotations of the data present in primary databases. In today's world, the gathering and processing of data constitute a very important part of research. Especially in the field of biology, data collection plays a pivotal role. Databases for protein structure prediction. The journey from a string of amino acids to a functionally relevant protein is not easy, and predicting its structure and function is next to impossible. The problem calls for the prediction of the tertiary structure of a protein from its amino acid sequence. This is highly desirable for the following reasons. The structure of a protein can be directly correlated to its function as a biological macromolecule. Structure prediction using experimental techniques such as X-ray crystallography are time consuming and expensive in comparison to the structure determination from a primary sequence. Many proteins such as membrane proteins do not lend themselves to the structure solution. The aim of most protein structure databases is to organize and annotate the protein structures, providing the biological community access to the experimental data in a useful way. Data included in protein structure databases often includes three-dimensional coordinates as well as experimental information such as unit cell dimensions and angles for X-ray crystallography determined structures. Though most instances in this case, either proteins or a specific structure determinations of a protein also contain sequence information, and some databases even provide means for performing sequence-based queries. The Protein Data Bank or PDB. The Protein Data Bank or PDB is the main primary database used these days for 3D structures of biological macromolecules. PDB or Protein Data Bank is a repository of the three-dimensional structural data of large biological macromolecules such as protein and nucleic acid or their complexes. PDB stores the data that are obtained by X-ray crystallography, NMR, electron microscopy. The PDB is the key resource for structural biotechnologists. PDB database is updated weekly. The data in this bank contain details of the atomic coordinates, some structural and additional data computed from the structures. It was originally developed and managed by Brookhaven National Laboratories, but now it is managed and maintained by RCSB. As of November 1st, 2011, the PDB contains the following components presented in the table. In the table, you can see that the various experimental methods which are used for determining the protein structure. X-ray crystallography, the number of proteins determined by this method were 62,894, nucleic acids 1,323, protein nucleic acid complexes 3,053, others 2, getting a total of 67,272. By NMR, the number of proteins whose structure were determined were 7,970, nucleic acids 960, protein nucleic acid complexes 179, others 7, bringing a total of 9,116. By electron microscopy, the number of proteins whose structure were determined were 262, nucleic acids 22, protein nucleic acid complexes 97, getting a total of 381. By the hybrid method, the number of proteins whose structure were determined were 41, nucleic acids 3, protein nucleic acid complexes 1, others 1, bringing a total of 46 structures. Contents of PDB. These data show that most of the data in the PDB are determined by X-ray crystallography. About 12% of structures are determined by protein NMR. From X-ray diffraction method, the approximations of the coordinates of the atoms of the protein are obtained, whereas NMR method estimates the distances between pairs of atoms of the protein. Very few protein structures are determined by electron microscopy. PDB file format. The file format that was used by PDB was called the PDB file format. However, during the late 90s, the macromolecular crystallographic information file format MMCIF was introduced. The details of the file format have been presented in an XML version which is called PDB-ML. The structure files can be downloaded from the PDB web server in any of these formats. The individual PDB files can be easily downloaded into graphic packages using web addresses. By convention, the names of each PDB files start with a number followed by 3 letters like 1 SMT. Abbreviation key. Here are a list of abbreviations which are commonly used in protein structure determination. Header, which denotes the type of protein, COMPND, which is the chemical compound, source, which is the organism name, EXPDTA. In case of NMR data, it gives the number of structures considered. Author gives the author names of the paper. RevDat is the revised date. JRNL, which is the journal information. REMAR, information about the paper in which the protein data was published. SEQRES, explicit protein sequence using 3-letter amino acid code. It also stores non-standard amino acids using arbitrarily chosen 3-letter names to represent a discrete sequence corresponding to multiple chains. It also includes entries for chain identifiers using a single uppercase letter or blank space. FT note or footnotes. FORMUL, formula for the compound. Atom. This describes the orthogonal coordinate system of an implicit sequence and names of each atom. Connect. It describes the connectivity between atoms. Model. This gives the NMR data which contains several models corresponding to different conformations. End MDL, end of model information. END, end of the PDB file. Contents. The deposited data to PDB are considered as primary data. These primary data may include atomic coordinates, information related to the chemistry of the macromolecule, the small molecule ligands, some data collection details, structure refinement, and some structural descriptors. A PDB entry may contain about 400 unique items of data. Data acquisition and processing. There are 3 main steps in data processing: data deposition, annotation, and validation. Previously, data was submitted to PDB via email, but now author can submit his or her data online via the PDB auto-dip input tool based on MMCIF developed by RCSB. Within minutes of structure deposition using ADIT, a PDB identifier is sent to the author automatically. For accuracy, PDB files are checked in various aspects such as nomenclature, chemistry of the polymer and ligands, stereochemical validation, etc. In present times, structure factors and NMR constraint files are also deposited along with most of the data files. The author reviews the processed files and sends back after any further revisions. Depending on the importance of these revisions, previous steps may be repeated. As soon as approval is received from the author, it becomes ready for distribution. Shortcomings. PDB may have some better representation such as for very large macromolecules, disordered structures, X-ray structures refined with multiple models. Most difficult problem for the protein data bank is that the files are not uniform. CATH or Class Architecture Topology Homology. The CATH protein structure classification method is a semi-automatic hierarchical classification of protein domains. The database was first published in 1997 by Christine Orengo, Janet Thornton and their colleagues. CATH carries many broad features with its principal rival SCOP. CATH utilizes the classification of proteins as the basis of its organization. This classification is similar to enzyme classification that is used to classify enzymes. Like the EC system, CATH is numerically indexed hierarchy of protein domain structures. CATH cluster proteins at 4 major levels. Number 1, class. Class is derived from secondary structure contents of proteins. It is assigned for more than 90% of protein structures automatically. CATH recognizes 3 major classes, mainly alpha, beta, alpha-beta, which has both alternating alpha-beta structures and alpha plus beta structures, and a 4th class which contains protein domains which have low secondary structure content. Architecture. Architecture describes the gross orientation of secondary structures independent of connectivity in proteins. This category describes the overall shape of the domain structure. Topology. Topology of CATH clusters protein structures according to the topological connections and the numbers of secondary structures. This level of hierarchy is the fold level. Structures are grouped into fold families after considering the overall shape and connectivity of the secondary structures. It uses the SSAP algorithm, which compares protein structures based on the distance blot analysis. Only those structures that have an SSAP score of 60 to 80 are assigned to the same T level or fold family. Homologous superfamily. It groups proteins with highly similar structures and functions. The assignments of protein structures to the last two categories, that is topology and homologous superfamilies, are made by sequence and structure comparisons. Structures are clustered into the same homologous superfamily if they satisfy one of the following criteria. The first criteria is sequence identity greater than or equal to 35%, 60% of the larger structure equivalent to smaller. SSAP score should be greater than or equal to 80 and sequence identity should be greater than or equal to 20%. 60% of larger structure equivalent to smaller. SSAP score should be greater than or equal to 80, 60% of larger structure equivalent to smaller domains which have related functions. In cath, the class level classification is done on the basis of the following four criteria: the secondary structure contents of proteins, the secondary structure contacts of proteins, the secondary structure alternation score, and the percentage of parallel strands in proteins. It currently stores 34,287 protein domain structures grouped into 13 superfamilies and 3,825 sequence families. In this image, you can see the results which are obtained when in the search box field text box hexokinase was entered. Cath data formats. Cath supports the following flat file formats: cath domain description file. Information in this file format is compiled from the following files: cath list, cath domal, cath domain FASTA sequences, cath segment FASTA sequences, PDB-SU, file in CDDF format, and chain limits file in CDDF format. Cath domal. This file format describes domain boundaries for entries in the cath database. Only PDB chains that have been split into domains have a cath domal entry. Note that domains that are composed of whole PDB chains are not found in this file. Cath list. Cath list contains an entry for each structural entry in cath. Representative structural domains are selected from cath list based on the numbering scheme. Cath names. This file contains description of each node in the cath hierarchy for class, architecture, topology, and homologous superfamily levels. It is organized into columns. Column 1 would have the node number. Column 2 would have the representative protein domain, which is a cath 6-letter domain name. Sample cath protein file. The structure record of the protein data bank is a unique 4-character alphanumeric code called PDB-D or PDB code. Cath houses the same in its database, where information is described as follows. Title section. This section gives us information on the header, which is an ID code field which identifies the file from the other PDB files. Title denotes the title for the experiment or analysis. COMPND, which denotes the macromolecular contents. Source. This indicates the biological or chemical source. Keywords, the set of terms relevant to the entry. EXP-DTA, an experiment information such as the technique used. Author. This denotes the name of the persons who submitted it. RevDat, the revision data since the release of the entry. JRNL, name of the featuring journal. Remark, any experimental details, annotations, comments. Primary structure section. This section gives us information about the primary sequence or the sequence of residues for each chain of the protein. This section also gives information about non-standard residues. Information about the name and formula of heterogroups in the macromolecule are also included in the section. SEQRES, sequence of residues for each chain of the protein. HET, non-standard residues such as prosthetic groups, inhibitors, solvents, and ions. Secondary structure section. This section contains the data on the helices, sheets and turns found in protein. Position of turns, helices and sheets are provided, helix which are named and numbered. Connectivity annotation section. This section gives information about the existence and location of disulfide bonds and other linkages. Miscellaneous features section. This section contains information that is unique to a structure, which includes special features like an active site. Crystallographic and coordinate transformation section. This section gives information about the geometry of the crystallographic experiment and the coordinate system transformations. Coordinate section. This section gives only information which pertains to the given atomic coordinates of the structure. Connectivity section. This section gives information on the chemical conductivity or how the atoms are connected to each other. Information here includes hydrogen bonds, salt bridges and links. Bookkeeping section. This section gives final information about the file itself. The cath classification scheme is mostly automated, but some human intervention is required in the process. Various algorithms are used in cath. Cath emphasizes on clustering proteins that have a similar fold so as to increase the understanding of sequence or structure relationships within protein fold families. Cath aims to improve homology modeling and structure prediction methods. SCOP or structural classification of protein. The structural classification of protein or SCOP database is basically a database with manual classification of protein structural domains. The whole concept is based on similarities of the amino acid sequences and three-dimensional structures of the proteins. The database was originally published in 1995 and it is usually updated at least once yearly by Emmrc and his colleagues. This database is maintained manually and all protein structures in the PDB are classified. It is updated regularly. This database takes the information present in PDB and adds a layer of information in terms of analysis and or organization. This database is a rather large one and houses all proteins of known structure. The organization of the database is such that the proteins are arranged in accordance to their evolutionary, functional and structural relationships, the basic unit being a protein domain. SCOP database uses the following protein structural hierarchy. Class. It is the general structural architecture of the protein domains. Fold. It represents similar arrangement of regular secondary structures but without evidence of evolutionary relatedness. Superfamily. It represents whether the protein structures have sufficient structural and functional similarities to each other to infer a divergent evolutionary relationship but not necessarily a detectable sequence homology. Family. Proteins belonging to the same family share some sequence similarity. This classification of proteins in SCOP is more significantly based on the human expertise. It is generally accepted that SCOP gives a better justified classification. It is generally the human expertise that is important to decide whether some proteins are evolutionarily related and therefore should be placed in the same superfamily or their similarity is only a result of structural constraints present in the proteins to classify them to the same fold. SCOP has the following classes. Number 1, proteins with mostly alpha helical domains. Number 2, proteins with mostly beta sheet domains. Number 3, proteins with alpha or beta domains which contain beta alpha beta structural units or motifs that form mainly parallel beta sheets. Number 4, proteins with mostly alpha plus beta domains consisting of independent alpha helices and mainly anti-parallel beta sheets. Number 5, multi-domain proteins. Number 6, membrane proteins and cell surface proteins and peptides. Number 7, small proteins. Number 8, coiled proteins. Number 9, low resolution protein structures. Number 10, peptides and fragments. Number 11, proteins designed from non-natural sequence. This image shows the organization of SCOP database entries. The table here shows the various contents of the SCOP class, the number of folds, the number of superfamilies, and the number of families which are included in the SCOP. SCOP entry. All SCOP entries have the same format as in PDB files. It includes the following: header, it gives the names and data of an entry; title name and briefly describes the content of an entry; deposition lists the people who determine the structure and the date when the data was deposited in the PDB; taxonomy lists the taxonomic assignments for each chain. If all the chains of the structure have the same assignment, only one link is given. Reference links to literature references in PubMed. These citations have been taken from PDB and are linked to PubMed by citation matching. MMDB gives the identifier which can be used to retrieve structure data from MMDB. This unique and stable number is assigned to each new structure when it is entered into MMDB. PDB is a 4-character identifier used in PDB. Clicking the identifier will lead to the corresponding PDB entry. Search or keyword search advanced options for SCOP. SCOP can be accessed by using the following methods. Keyword search of SCOP entries. Enter SCOP at the top of the hierarchy. SCOP parsable files will be obtained. All SCOP releases and reclassifies entry history. SCOP domain sequences and PDB style coordinate files. Let us try to search for a known kinase using the keyword search of SCOP. Once the search page is opened, you need to type in kinase in the text box. Select the search in the SCOP database option and click retrieve information. The next page you will get a long list of returns. Search for a family that is calmodulin like. The result page would show as shown in the following image. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this session. The different databases discussed here provide different information. PDB gives both structural and sequence information of macromolecules, whereas SCOP and CATH have structures based on their evolutionary relationships and folding classes. The structural classifications of proteins are generally obtained from SCOP and CATH. On the other hand, the UniProt or SwissProt database provides the sequence annotations of proteins along with links to the external databases like PDB. All these databases are increasing day by day. There are other databases and some new databases are coming. But the databases discussed here are considered to be the foundation stones of bioinformatics. Here are a few questions for you to work out. Number 1. What are databases? Why do we need databases for protein structure prediction? Number 2. Name some of the important databases used for protein structure prediction. Number 3. Explain how PDB is used for predicting the protein structure and write a note on its limitations. Number 4. Explain how the database CATH clusters proteins at various levels. Number 5. Compare the databases SCOP and CATH. Here I can suggest a few books for your reference. Bioinformatics, Concepts, Skills and Applications, written by S.C. Rastogi, Namita Mendirata and Parag Rastogi, published by CBS Publishers and Distributors, 1993, first edition. Understanding Bioinformatics, written by Marketa Swellable, Jeremy O. Baum, published by Garland Science Publishers, 2008. Bioinformatics, Databases, Tools and Algorithms, written by Orpita Basu, Siminder Kaur Thukral, published by Oxford University Press, 2007. Thank you for watching this program. Let's meet in the next session with a new topic. Till then, bye.
Hello and welcome to a session on examination reforms and emerging trends in educational evaluation. Examinations are a vital part of our educational system, and it is education and examination system that is exposed to criticism and reforms the most. As early as 1857, with establishment of universities in Calcutta, Madras and Bombay, examinations have been under criticism. In this unit, we will learn criticisms of examination, modern concepts of examinations, functions of examinations, examination reforms and remedial measures. Educationists have called examinations with names such as an enemy of true education, an obstacle to learning, a dead hand of education, a growing tyranny, a bloodsucker, etc. The reason for examinations getting such a bad reputation can be attributed to its limitations. Examination as a form of evaluation lacks objectivity, validity and reliability. One of the major criticisms an examination system faces is that it does not evaluate a student's overall development, both cognitive and non-cognitive development. Criticisms of examination. An examination is widely known as a necessary evil. One of the major criticisms is that it distorts knowledge, making students believe that what is examined is only important and mastery of a subject only means accumulation of facts. According to J. Krishnamurthy, comparison is not the right way to evaluate a student's progress. He opined that comparing one person with another in terms of grades and marks will not improve the education system. S.M. Mukherjee, chairman of examination session, observed in an All India Educational Conference that the conclusion is irresistible that education in India, dominated by external control and tutelage in the form of fragmentary and unscientific examination, has resulted in the perpetuation of mediocrity and retardation of genius, facts which are necessary concomitants if not inevitable consequences of the prevailing system. The University Education Commission 1948-49, presided by Dr. Radhakrishnan, also did not have very high opinion about the then prevalent examination system. He said, for nearly half a century, the examinations has been recognized as one of the worst feature of Indian education. Along with the University Education Commission 1948-49, the Secondary Education Commission 1952-53 and the Kothari Commission 1964-65 have criticized and suggested reforms for the Indian examination system. Why examination system underwent criticisms? The examination system had and still has a lot of drawbacks. A few of them are given below. Lack of specific objective. Our examination system is not geared up to meet a specific aim. For instance, the same examination is used as a criterion for passing tests, getting admission for higher education and for getting employment. All these in fact demand various skills, and the examination are not tailor-made to test the talents that are required for these different purposes. Elements of chance. The existing examination system relies heavily on the elements of chance. A student might face an examination learning a selected portion, and if such selected portions figure in the question paper, he or she will score the best marks in the exam. Lowering of educational standards. According to the Secondary Education Commission 1952-53, the examination determines the content of education as well as teaching methods. The success of a teacher is evaluated by the percentage of students who pass the examination, which will force a teacher to adapt to exam-centric teaching methods. Lowering of moral standards. Examinations force students to be dishonest. In order to succeed in an examination, students even smuggle textbooks to the examination hall. Ignoring quality of character. The present examinations fail to test a person's character such as honesty, loyalty, initiative, sociability, ability to think originally, etc. Elements of subjectivity. The mindset and the subjectivity of a person who evaluate the paper can to an extent determine the marks. Putting students through mental stress. Examinations put students through mental stress and anxiety. Promoting supremacy of textbooks. Examinations make students believe that what is said in the textbook is important and memorizing and reproducing them will win the examination. And this supremacy of textbook will lead to critical thinking losing its validity in education. Modern concepts of examinations. Before discussing the reforms suggested by various commissions, it is important to have an understanding about examinations. Only after getting a fair idea about modern concepts of examinations and the functions of examination, we can fully understand the reforms suggested by various experts and commissions. In this module, we will discuss modern concept of examination. Examinations have been in existence ever since the educational institutions came into existence. Even in Nalanda University, an admission test was conducted according to Huangsang, and only 2 out of 10 people got admission to the college. Well, now let us examine what are the modern concept of examination put forward by experts and scholars. Carter-V-Good's definition. Carter-V-Good, 1959, in his Dictionary of Education, defines examination as a test of knowledge acquired, or more generally a mode of assessing intellectual capacity or ability. According to Good, there are 3 types of examinations. 1. A set of questions formulated to test a student's progress on the results of a course of instruction. 2. A way of qualifying candidates for a certificate or degree which are necessary for passing certain honors. 3. A competitive test which is designed to evaluate the scholarship of a student. An examination can be conducted by means of written answers. Examination according to International Dictionary of Education. The dictionary is published by Terry Page and J.B. Thomas in 1979, and according to it, an examination is 1. Assessment of ability, achievement or present performance in a subject. 2. Instrument of assessment can be long essay or a mixed form of assessment. 3. May be used for qualifying for entrance to professions and higher education. A Dictionary of Education. Published in 1981 by Derek Downstey, the dictionary explains education as a formal assessment of a student's learning used particularly at the end of a course. Although many teachers bemoan the distorting influence an examination can have on teaching and learning, when used wisely, they can assess students' qualities that can otherwise go unobserved. An examination usually involves one or more of the following features. All students are given same task to perform, perhaps with some degree of choice. Its precise nature will not be clear until the moment they begin upon it. They will be given a time limit, or they will not be allowed to consult one another. They will perform in the presence of an invigilator, and they will be expected to experience some sense of urgency or stress. Nowadays, many examinations relax one or more of these restrictions. Example, students may be given advance notice of the questions or may be allowed to use certain reference materials, but the last mentioned feature usually remains. Now we know that examinations as see them now are based the concepts put forward by such experts. Now let us understand the functions of examinations. functions of examinations. Examinations are supposed to fulfill certain objectives. The below listed are a few functions of examinations. To evaluate the achievement of a student. The major function of an examination is to check and examine the abilities and achievements of a student. Examinations are organized to test if a student could achieve certain abilities, knowledge and skills. To measure personality. Examinations are conducted to test the quickness of mind, calmness and determination. To measure the efficiency of teachers and the school. Examinations provide the teachers and the school an opportunity to evaluate whether their strategies and teaching methods are useful. To help diagnose. Examination allows teachers and parents to understand the progress and weakness of a student. Teachers can take corrective measures based on the analysis. Motivation for hard work. Examinations put a set of goals and targets in front of a student. The student will work hard to achieve these goals and targets put forward by examinations. To help in prognosis. The prognostic value of examination helps teachers to determine the aptitude of a student. To provide uniformity of standards. External examinations can solve the problem of uniformity of standards. Students coming from different institutions under one university will have the same standard of examination. To measure fitness for admission for higher courses. Examinations are designed to test the fitness of students for higher education. Such examinations are called entrance examinations or qualifying examinations. To help selection in a competition. To select candidates for appointment for public service examinations are used. To study every subject. Examinations are used as a way to force students to study the basis of every subject. They can choose their specializations at a later stage. To link schools with the world. Examinations function as connecting link between the school and the world outside by making students competent enough to participate in the challenges required for attaining jobs. We have seen that most of the above mentioned functions or examinations in ability to attain such functions is heavily criticized by experts. Now let us understand some of the reforms and suggestions brought in by certain commissions and other such bodies constituted by experts in the field. Examination reforms. As we have already seen, the University Education Commission 1948-49, the Secondary Education Commission 1952-53, the Kothari Commission 1964-65 and NEP 1986 have criticized and suggested reforms for the Indian examination system. In this session, we will discuss some of the suggestions made by certain such expert committees and the reforms took place in written, oral and practical examinations. Reforms suggested by commissions and committees. Suggestion for examination reform by the University Education Commission 1948-49. In the suggestions given by the commission headed by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, the stress was given to introduce the objective type questions. Following are suggestions made by the commission. Suggested the technique in formulating and constructing objective test for the class examination in colleges and universities. According to the commission, the government should not look for candidates with university degrees for administrative services. Recognition should be given for the work done during the course of instruction and 1/3 of the mark allotted to each subject should be reserved to this work. The standard of success at various examinations should be uniform in all universities. divided, rank and suggested 70% or more marks should be given the rank of first class, 55% to 69% for the rank of second class, and at least 40% for a rank of third class. The system of grace marks should be scrapped. Viva voce examination should be conducted only for professional and postgraduate degrees. The essay type questions should be used along with the objective type questions, but the type of questions, method of examination should be thoroughly changed in order to make it more valid and reliable. Observations made by Secondary Education Commission 1952-53. The Commission, headed by Dr. Lakshmanaswamy Mudaliar, to acknowledge that examination system existed in country had many faults. According to the Commission, examination dictates the curriculum instead of following it, prevents experimentation, hamper proper treatment of subjects and sound method of teaching, foster dull uniformity and encourages average pupils to concentrate too rigidly on narrow fields. The Commission made a few important observations and suggested a few reform for the examination scenario. Introduction of objective type questions. Directed to keep school records for evaluating all-round performance of the students. Symbolic marking instead of numeric marking. More external examinations must be conducted. In final evaluation, credit must be given to both internal test and school records. Only one public examination at the completion of secondary school courses. Introduction of a system of compartmental examination at the final public examination. Kothari Commission 1964. According to Kothari, a major goal of examination reform should be to improve the reliability and validity of examinations and to make evaluation a continuous process. The aim of the evaluation must be to help students improve their level of achievement. It should not be evaluating and certifying the quality of students' achievement at a given time. A few of the recommendations are as follows. The written examinations should be improved. Devise examination techniques to test other aspects of students that cannot be measured using written test. Evaluation at the lower primary level should help students improve their basic skills and cultivate good habits and attitudes. At a higher level, importance must be given to oral test as a part of internal assessment. In addition to the common test, special tests may be held at the end of primary course for awarding scholarship or certificates of merits. A few selected schools must be given the right to assess their own students. Internal assessment should be comprehensive enough to all other aspects of students' growth aspects that are not tested through written external examinations. During the transition period, higher students will have to appear for 2 successive external examinations. Examination Reform and National Policy of Education, NPE 1986. The NPE indeed consider examinations as an integral part of teaching and learning. To make the process evaluation more reliable and credible, the NPE indeed consider the following suggestion. Only at the end of class 10 and 12, public examination should be held. Valuation process should be decentralized. There should be a number of sub-centers to conduct valuation work. Malpractices connected with examinations should be treated as cognizable and unbillable offence. Teachers involved in invigilation and valuation must be given protection enough to ensure fair conduct of examinations and evaluation process. Importance must be given to institutional evaluation on internal assessment along with external assessment. The teachers who have expertise in a subject should evaluate the subjects on a particular subject. As a result of the suggestions, an assessment committee on basic education was formed in 1955-56 to review the examination system. In addition to the above mentioned bodies, there are many others who made significant contributions towards examination reforms. Here is a list of a few of the important government bodies. The Committee on Rural Higher Education, 1954-57. Chairman B. Mukherjee stressed the need for assessment of practical and social activities of the students. Study Team on General Education, 1955-57. Headed by Dr. S. Bhagavatham, suggested that passing an examination in the prescribed format should be made a requisite condition before graduation. The Examination Committee, 1957, appointed by the UGC to bring reforms in the university level, Chairman S.R. Dongarkari recommended methods of evaluation other than essay-type questions such as multiple choice test, short answer test, YOC, etc. Decisions of Government of Orissa, 1997. In this context, the reforms made by Orissa government in 1997 is also important. The government of Orissa had expressed its concern over failing students in HSC examination conducted by the Board of Secondary Education. The poor performance of students from Orissa in national level examinations was also a worrying factor. To rectify the issues, the government had decided that in class 9, emphasis will be given to internal examination conducted by various organizations and schools. HSC examination, on the other hand, would be external and will be based on class 10 syllabus. The examination reforms were considered as part of national program and the Central Examination Unit CEU was set up. In order to take up the program forwarded, the Education Ministry invited the participation of international expertise. In 1957, Dr. Benjamin S. Bloom, the then Chief Examiner of University of Chicago, was invited to advise the examination reformation task. During his stay in India, he worked with more than 300 schools and helped the Government of India to draw an action plan for examination reforms. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. In this unit, we have mapped the history of education and examination reforms in India. We have learned that drawbacks in the examination system has forced commissions and committees headed by visionaries such as Dr. Lakshmanaswamy Mudaliar, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Dr. D.S. Kothari, etc. have made useful recommendations and suggestions to make our nation's examination system more holistic. They all realized that current examination system fails to access certain traits of a student and imposes the supremacy of textbooks. The suggestions include points like making evaluation decentralized, adding objective questions, giving importance to both external and internal examinations, etc. In this unit, we have also studied in detail the drawbacks of our examination system and learned that the system is not sufficient to meet specific goal and heavily relies on element of chance. We can also study some of the criticisms against the system raised by eminent scholars. For instance, according to J. Krishnamurthy, comparison is not the right way to evaluate students' progress. He opined that comparing one person with another in terms of grades and marks will not improve the education system. We have also understood the features and functions of an ideal examination. The features include evaluating the achievement of students, measuring the personality, bringing uniformity to the evaluation system, to study every subject and to link the school with the world outside. Now, you can try to answer the questions given here. 1. What are the drawbacks of the examination system? 2. What is Carter-V-Good's definition on examination? 3. What are the suggestions made by MEP? 4. What are the examination reforms suggested by committee headed by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan? Hope that you may go through the reference books listed here for further reading. Essentials of Examination System, Evaluation Test and Measurement by Agarwal J.C. 1997, Vikas Publishing House Private Limited. Education in India, Problems and Perspectives by -M 2000, Atlantic Publishers and Distributors. Problems of Higher Education in India, An Approach to Structural Analysis and Reorganization by Joshi K.L. 1977, Popular Prakashan. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again with another topic. Have a nice day.